And I have two different 100% cotton fabrics that I purchased, and I've pre-washed them in hot water and a mild detergent. We want to wash our fabrics because we want to get out the chemicals that they use to print. And I also have, and I bought the whole bulk because I'm making so many, but you can buy it by the yard, Fusible Interfacing. And the interfacing is going to add a little bit of body and stiffness to the mask, similar to the collar on a dress shirt or a cuff on a shirt. It helps add a little bit of stiffness to it. This brand is Pleating Fusible Sheer Weight Interfacing. I like Fusible because it's easier to work with, but there's also sew-in. So those are your two options. And I have my cutting mat. I have my cutting wheel, which is kind of like a pizza cutter. A little tip on this when you're using it: keep your hand behind you when you're cutting. It's really easy to not be thinking and then make that mistake and cut your hand. So we also, I've got a acrylic ruler, and this is 6 inches across, and this is like actually perfect for what we're making. So I'm really excited that they come default by 6 inches. And I have a weight to hold some fabric in place. If you don't have weights, and I actually have this covered in plastic just to kind of keep it clean, but you could use like hand weights that you have at home to work out, like a little 2-inch or, you know, 5-pound, 7-pound weight. So I also have, I'm using bias tape to make mine because I think it's going to be faster and easier. This is 1/2-inch wide bias tape, double fold, extra wide double fold, and I'll make sure that the camera gets a nice picture of that. And this is what it looks like once it comes out. You can also use any kind of ribbon or anything that you want, but I like the bias tape because it's going to be an all-in-one real quick thing for us to do. So I'm going to stop this video right here and see how it's rolling. Okay, I'm going to show you how to lay out your fabric in order to cut these. If you haven't sewn in a while and you need a refresher, the selvage edges, you can usually tell the selvage edge of the fabric. It's the edge that comes off the bolt. The fabric is usually folded on the selvage edge, but after you wash it, it might be a little bit hard to tell that. You want to put your selvages together. The selvages usually have like some text or copy written on them, so you want to put those selvage edges together. And you just want to like make a nice fold here. And I'm going to take that ruler because 6 inches seems to be just right for us. I think I'm going to add a little bit to it for seam allowance. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my ruler and I'm just going to cut a nice clean edge on this. And again, I'm going to use my weight to help me with the ruler. If you got a weight at home that you use to lift weights, that'll work perfectly. And just like a pizza cutter, that's just going to cut that off. And I'm going to give myself a little bit of extra room. I'm going to line up this nice cut right here on this marker. And I'm going to give myself, and I'm using over here 1/2 inch, and I'm using a 1/2 inch over here, and I'm giving myself like a little 1/2 inch strip here. I'm going to put the weight down because we're going to do a 1/4 inch seam, and so that we have a nice cut, I'm going to do straight across here. And if your blade is sharp, it should cut nice and clean for you. If it doesn't, a little back and forth action, kind of like cutting a pizza, sometimes helps. And there we go. Nice cut. I'm going to do the same thing for the pink. And I'm going to cut those pieces so that I have, from selvage to selvage, I have a 6.5 inch piece on both fabrics. I'm using the pink and the blue. I'm also going to do the same thing with the interfacing. I want to have interfacing, and the nice thing about the interfacing is that it doesn't have to be exactly the length of the fabric. I'm going to just cut myself a nice clean edge here, and I'm going to cut myself close to about 6.5 inches here. I've got 6 with the ruler. I'm looking at the measurements on the mat, and I'm just going to cut myself a couple pieces of this 6.5 that I'm supposed to use later. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect because you're going to work it in as you iron it in. So it can be off just a little bit. There's a seam allowance there, so we're not going to fuss too much about it. I'm counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6.5. I'm using the dot here and the dot here. 6.5 inch piece. And again, same thing here. I'm going to leave that right where it's at, and I'm just going to put this ruler right down on that solid line at 16, and then I know that's 6.5. And how easy is that? That seems like 3 pieces. Looks like it should be about enough. So that's going to be a little over 19 inches, 19.5 inches, I think, of fusible interfacing that I have. Trash goes on the floor. That's what we do when we sew. Sweep the floor later. And there's my trash bag. And so I'm going to put this to the side, and then I'm going to cut my pink fabric 6.5 inches, and I'll be right back. All right, guys, I'm back. I'm going to put these 2 pieces of fabric together from the outside, and the first thing I want to do is I'm cutting off that waist where it says has some copy on the sides of the selvage edges, and here again I'm seeing some waste here. I'm going to cut that off so I don't end up putting that into my beautiful mask that I'm making for people. Hopefully that will make them happy. I'm going to do a little cleanup on this side as well. And yep, look, I got Joann's fabrics there, so I'm going to cut that off. Now what I ended up with was 2 pieces of fabric, and if I measure this, this is going to be about 21 inches. So you got 42 inches. So divide it by 8, which is the width that they're recommending. 8 times 4 is 32. So you definitely are going to get 4 masks out of this. You might get 5, but we're going to do our best. Oh, I see a little bit of selvage edge there, so I'm gonna wing it without the ruler. So I'm going to put the good sides of the fabric together, and I'm going to lay them face to face, just like that. And I'm going to match them up. You could use the weight if you have a weight. And then I'm going to start pinning them together, because pins make good seams. And I use a magnet, not a pin cushion. So if you got some magnets around your house, they actually work better than a pin cushion. And you can just pin like railroad tracks. You're going not towards the length of the garment, but like this. And about every hand, I'm going to say, I'm going to go by my hand, and I'm just going to put that in there. And keep in mind that these are pleated items, so yeah, you want nice clean seams, but I'm not going to stress over matching the fabric up. I'm going to let the weight of the fabric and the pins do the work for me and get as close as I can, because we're going to be cutting some of that fabric off. And I'm going to turn it over because I want to be able to sew both sides. And I am going to pin here in the beginning. And everything is nice and flat. The nice thing about working with cotton is that it's super easy to work with. It sews beautifully. If you have any problems, it's probably a problem with your machine, not the fabric. It's one of the easiest fabrics to sew. It's a great beginner fabric. So if you're kind of new to this and you haven't sewn before, or you know, you haven't sewn in a while, this is a great project to get you acclimated to sewing again, because cotton's so easy to sew. So I'm going to set up my sewing machine in the video cam so that you can see what I'm doing on the machine, and then we'll come back to the cutting board in a little bit. Okay, I'm back, and I just wanted to note that I showed you a picture of a needle that I prefer for sewing cotton. A lot of quilters use it. It's called a Microtex, and it works very nicely on just about any fabric. And now I'm going to show you how to wind a bobbin, because I'm sure many of you haven't threaded your machine in a while, or used a machine. You're going to put it on here, put your thread here. There's going to be some kind of round gauge that you're going to go around, and you kind of just put it in there like floss between your teeth. And then you take your bobbin, and there's a hole at the top of your bobbin, and you're just going to put that thread like right up and through. So I want you to pull that tight. And here's the key. I've had this problem before where a friend messaged me. Take your bobbin and click it over to activate it. That's how you get your bobbin casing to work. And then push the pedal to the metal on your sewing pedal. And keep holding the thread so it doesn't get tangled like that just did, up so that it'll thread your bobbin. There we go. And it's off. And at some point I usually come in here and I cut this. My sewing desk, I put a little bag here for my trash and my clippings and things. It helps kind of save my floor from being a disaster when I'm done sewing. I'm using my light with magnets. I've got some pins up there. I've got a screwdriver. I've got little things that I use during sewing. And I'm kind of using my hand and I'm evening out this bobbin. An even bobbin is a good bobbin. It's your base thread below the machine. I'm just kind of evening out. And when the bobbin is full, the machine will stop winding it. So you don't have to worry about anything like that. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to leave that there, and I'm going to thread my machine. And most machines have a guideline on it to tell you how to thread it. And I'm going to come down, up and around. I'm going to come down here, and I'm going to thread my needle. And now's the point where I need my glasses because I have really good vision, but my close-up vision needs a little bit of help. So, I put them in here. I'm just getting this ready. So, I'm going to put my glasses on. I'm going to put my foot down that holds my fabric. And I am going to hopefully thread that needle. Yep. It's in, and I'm gently pulling it to the back. So, I'm putting it through the slot of my foot. I've lifted my foot, and I can gently feel that, and it's pulling nicely. I'm going to open up my bobbin case. I'm going to unclick and move that from the far right to the far left on my bobbin. And I'm going to have my bobbin, and I'm going to hold this. And I'm going to drop my bobbin into that case in the bottom. And when I put that in and I pull this string, I want to make sure that that bobbin is going counterclockwise. So if it's going clockwise, it's incorrect. You want to make sure that it's going counterclockwise. And there should be a little slot that you can feed that thread through and gently pull that bobbin thread. So there you go. Let's see. I'm going to go down and up with it. And I'm just going to make sure when I go down with the needle and pull up, that grabs my bobbin thread for me. And now my machine is threaded, ready to go. I put it on straight stitch. Now I want to make sure that everything's good before I start actually working on my garment. So it's just a preventative measure for me. I always have a little piece of fabric that I'm going to sew. That's a scrap piece of fabric. This is scrap cotton. It's kind of like my testing fabric. And I'm just going to put that in there. And I'm going to give it a little go. I'm going to lift my foot, pull away from the machine, and clip. And I like how my stitches are looking. Everything looks good. I've been sewing on this regularly, so I'm not worried. You do have tension at the top, and I can show you how to adjust your tension on the bottom. If you have any problems, leave me a little message on the bottom thread, and I can help you with that. But here it is. Here's our 4-5 masks that we're going to try and make today. And I've got a little extra blue fabric, so I'm going to clip off this blue fabric. Scrap, I don't need it. And when I sew, I'm going to sew this at 1/4 inch, and you have guidelines on your machine that will show you. I basically just use the foot as my guide for my 1/4 inch. It helps. There's also a little line on the machine. When I start, I'm going to start it really narrow. I'm going to go right here. I'm going to use where that slot is for my thread. because I want a little extra room. And I'm going to go backwards a couple stitches. What that does is it knots your sewing on the end. So you only need to go backwards like about 3 inches. But I'm going to use this. There's a guide right here for a 1/4 inch. I'm going to use that guide. I'm also using this little slot here. So I'm making sure that it doesn't go across my foot. And one of the things you want to do when you're sewing is to make sure that you're not pulling the fabric through the machine, and let the machine do the work. You can flatten the fabric and kind of guide it and hold it, but let the machine do the work. That's what it's supposed to do. Don't try and force it. Don't try to, you know, pull it through or push it through. That'll give you some problems a little further on down the road. Always stop with your needle down. If you stop anywhere when you're sewing, it just kind of keeps things in position. This looks like a basic rule of thumb. I'm going across. Normally I would use a serger. Now at the end I want to knot this, so I'm going to go backwards as well, a couple stitches. And with the needle up, I'm going to lift my foot and I'm going to pull away from the machine, and then I'm going to snip my threads. Most machines have a thread catch here where you can snip. I am just in the habit of using my scissors, so for what that's worth. And now I'm going to do the opposite side. Same thing. I'm going to go backwards and forwards, so about 2 or 3 stitches just to knot it. And I'm sewing at about 12 stitches per inch right now. You could do a little smaller, maybe 8 stitches per inch if you wanted to. It's completely up to you if you want to go a little slower. My machine has a speed on it, so I can adjust my speed, and I've got it floored, and that's as far as it'll go. I like driving a Ferrari, so I'm going really fast. I'm holding my fabric nice and flat. I'm watching that guide so that it's being guided exactly right here. So I'm sewing at a 1/4 of an inch. And I'm not going off of that 1/4 inch because we want the width to be finished 6 inches for our masks. And I did not go backwards, so I'm just going to go a little. There we go. Those are all going to get sewn, so it's all good. And so what we did was we just created a tube. And so I'm going to take all my pins out, and I have my magnet up here that takes my pins for me because pin cushions annoy me, so I use magnets. And I'm going to sew everything, pull all those pins, use my magnets, and alright, here we go. So now I'm going to go and turn this right side out with my hand. I should be able to effortlessly turn that right side out. Might have a little stiffness at first. Okay, how great is that? I'm going to give it a nice little, now I'm going to give it a quick press before I take the next step. So I'm going to show you that. Alright, so I have my tube of fabric that I sewed together, 2 different prints, and I'm going back to my best friend, my iron, because when your iron is hot and has steam, it does magic. And I am going to just kind of give a little squeeze going down the side of this cover that, or this tube of fabric that I'm making. You can see how nice that's pressing for me. And I am just going to use my iron to my advantage. And I'm kind of taking my fingers and I'm squeezing to expose where the 2 seams meet, so it gets nice and flat for me. You can use both hands like this. There's a couple little devices that you can buy that'll help you with that, but usually just using your fingers and staying ahead of the iron, you can do that very easily. And I'm going to apologize, the audio on this video is going to be horrible because my microphone is at my office in Pittsburgh, and it's not here in my home office, so the audio is going to be bad, but hopefully it's good enough that it can get you through this process. of making some masks. Whether you're making them for your parents or grandparents or your local hospital, whatever your purpose is. I have a friend that works at the Cleveland Clinic, and I asked her about this, making masks for the hospital, and she said she wasn't sure. She's a doctor there, and she said she wasn't sure whether the hospital would actually be able to use them, but that it can't hurt, and at the very worst case scenario is that we could donate them to the retirement communities, so that when Mother's Day and Easter and Father's Day comes around, that our elderly could wear the masks and maybe even get some face-to-face visits with the people that they love. The masks ideally that they're wearing, and when you see them wearing them in China, I don't think it's so much because this virus is viral and airborne, but it's so that when you touch your face, if you touch a surface and then touch your face, you have some sort of protection. And I think that's the main purpose when you see people wearing them in public. It's not that the virus is airborne so much as it is, just protecting your face. Another layer of protection from washing your hands. So I'm actually making my first mask for my mom, who is 80 years old and lives in a community, a retirement community, and I want to make sure to make something really nice for her that she can show off to all the ladies in the building, whom I'm also going to be making masks for. And so I'm making my mother's a little bit special. I am making my own bias tape. You can buy bias tape in the store. You can also make it. So, and this is a little bias tape maker that I have here. I've had it for years. You can buy it at Joann Fabrics. And all you have to do is feed the fabric through the bias tape maker. And it kind of does the work for you. And again, all you need is your best friend, your iron. So, there we go. It's feeding through, and it's starting to create this bias tape. And bias tape is basically just a fabric that's been folded, and so that you can fold it again and make a hem. So as I'm folding this, I'm pulling the bias tape backwards. I am also taking my iron to secure the position of that fabric that's being folded. And the ideal here for me in my design is that I want my mother to have a reversible mask, and I want it to be exceptionally pretty and something that she'll be proud of and she won't feel foolish wearing, and she can say, my daughter made this for me, and she'll give out a bunch of masks to the other ladies in the building. And we all know how our mothers are. They love to brag about us, so this will make her feel better to have something to give to the other ladies and brag about. Okay, so now that I've pulled that through, now I'm going to fold it one more time for the sewing part of this. And you want to fold it, when you fold this bias tape, you want to fold it so that one side is slightly bigger than the other, and press. Just slightly bigger. And I'm using my thumb and steam. My best friend, my iron, and steam. And I'm going to move forward this way. I cut this the length of the fabric from selvage to selvage, and I think it's going to be close to the perfect length for a mask for my mom. But it could be that maybe I need to shorten it, but we can decide that once we sew everything. And we can also take the scraps, the extra scraps, I think, and make some masks to donate. Alright. Right there, I have bias tape for my mask for my mom for one side, and I'm going to make the other side, and I'm going to pause this video. Alright guys, so we have our tube of fabric that's been pressed, and I am going to just trim off this little bit here because that's me just being particular. I'm cutting on the 10 line, and then I'm going to come over to 18, and I'm going to cut this 8 inches long. Like a pizza, just cutting it. And I'm going to put a little pressure on this wheel when I'm cutting downwards. I'm going to bring this over to the 10 line on my mat. I've got it on 10. And I'm going to come over to 18. And somebody said that larger masks should be 9 inches wide. So I'm going to make a couple larger ones too, a little bit wider. My mom has a wide base like mine. So I'm going to make 6 by 9 for my mom to make a larger one. And I'm going to come over here and make, could probably get 2 8s out of this. So I'm going to cut 2 8s, 10 to 18, 8 inches. I'm not worried about any hem allowance because we won't need one. And this one is perfect for a larger one, it looks like. I mean, the wonderful thing about doing it this way, like I have 18.5 right here. So I think that's a good size. Anywhere between 8 and 9 inches I think is good. So I have out of that tube 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 masks out of a 6.5 inch piece of fabric. I have made 6 masks, 5, I'm sorry, 5, ready to go. And then I have cut, I put my salvages together and I made my own bias tape as I was ironing. I'm going to show you how to make your own bias tape with a bias tape maker if you are so inclined and you want to buy one from Joann Fabrics. I have that on a line here and a line here. And I'm going to use my ruler and I'm going to cut that fabric. It's double folded. My salvages are over here. I have my salvages together and then I just doubled that fabric and folded it over. But I'm cutting 2-inch strips because I'm going to make bias tape that matches my mask because I want a pretty mask for my mom. And I'm also going to show you how to make it with ribbon and also with bias tape that you can buy. But if you want to save a little bit of money, you can make your own bias tape like I did for my mom. All right, time to sew. Okay guys, I'm back, and the first thing I want you to do is, we know that this is 6 inches wide. It should be 6 inches wide finished after we've looped and pressed it. I want you to take a pen. I've got a special pen that erases on fabric, but you can use a pencil. You can also use an ink pen if you have nothing else, because it's going to be sewn into the seam, so it really doesn't matter. And I want you to take your ruler and I want you to mark at 1.5 inches, just a little dot, a little mark at 3 inches, and another one at 1, 2, 3, 4, 4.5. All right, and I want you to do the same thing on the opposite side. And that's why they call me Grace. So at 1.5, I'm going to mark it. At 3, I'm going to mark it, and at 4.5, I'm going to mark it. And our goal, I'm going to put my cap back on my special marker here, and then I want you to take a pin, and in between the markings, I want you to put a pin. I don't need you to measure it. I just want you to eyeball it because this doesn't need to be exact. And there's some variables there that are going to make it not exact. So I just want you to put a little pin as an indication in between your markings. Our markings with our pen, as you can see, I've got the little markings at 1.5 inch, 3 inch, and 4.5 on either side. And then I put a pin in between my markings. You know, starting at the top, one in between, right in the middle, in between my markings. I'm not going to need one at the base or at the top. And I'm going to take the pins and I'm going to fold in. I'm going to take this dot and I'm going to fold in and I'm going to create a pleat. And the bottom of my pleat will be my dot And my pin, where I pinned it halfway, should be where the fold ends. And I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to take that dot and I am going to, what I definitely want to make sure that I do is not to overlap the fabric too much. So I'm going to play with it a little bit until I get to that point. So like this one, I might move it back a little bit just so they're flush with each other. I'm hoping that you can see that. So they're flush with each other, but not on top of each other. Same thing here. I'm going to take the blue dot and the pin will be my fold, but I want to give myself where it's not overlapping. So I hope that's helping and that everyone can see that. Keeping in mind that you're folding everything the same way. I'm going to come over here and do the same thing. I'm going to take the blue dot that I marked and I'm going to take it past the pin, and the pin is going to be basically the bottom of the fold and the blue dot is going to be the top of the fold. I'm going to then remove my pin and make it the pin for my pleat. I'm going to take the blue dot that I marked at 3 inches and I'm going to bring that forward and I'm going to let my pin, and I'm going to make them see where they're at. They are right next to each other, but they're not on top of each other. So it's not too much fabric for the machine to feed through when you go to sew it. Same thing over here. I'm going to go from the blue dot and I am going to go past that green pin and to where that green pin is basically the fold. But again, I don't want to overlap, so I'm going to kind of balance that out. And I'm going to pin it. All right. And this is going to create the pleats that you need. And you should be able to eyeball it, and your sides should be relatively close to the same size on either side when you line them up to each other. And that'll let you know how close you are to being the same on either side. So again, making sure that the folds are all folding in the same direction. You want them all going the same way, and that should be good. This is the fun part. It's always fun when you're behind the machine. Everybody has a different thing about sewing that they like. Some people like pressing, some people like cutting, some people like pattern making. I personally love to be behind the machine because I love when I'm making something. It makes me feel good, and I can't explain it. I just love that I can take the engineering part of it, something that's in my mind, and make it something physical. So I'm going to just pin my fold on my bias tape, and I want to have the side that I'm sewing this be the smaller of the bias tape. Remember, we folded that bias tape and we had one edge that was going to be slightly overlapping the other one, a little bit smaller. And I don't know if this can help you see it or not, if you can see the difference there. But there's just a little lip, just a little bit extra. And so I'm just pinning my centers on my mask so that I know exactly where those centers are. I don't need this pin, it was from the fold. And I actually don't even have to pin it in, I just want to pin it to it so that when I start sewing this, and again I want to have the narrower part up towards the goods, whatever your good side is, because I just want to know kind of where we're at. So on the ends here, on these, I'm going to just cut that on a diagonal like that, and it makes it really easy to just fold it in, tuck it, and then you're ready to sew it. And so I'm going to put this in here, and again I'm going to do the forward backward thing. I think I might just kind of do a little smaller stitch here just because I think I might need it. She's fighting me. She's fighting me for a reason. I'm not sure why. Sometimes machines do that, and I think it might be because I just didn't have a good enough start. So I'm going to start a little bit forward and then go backwards, just so that I can get a good start and get going on this. There we go. And when I'm sewing this, I'm going to grab a pointer that I have. I'm using the inside of my zigzag foot right here to keep my fabric so that I know that I'm right on point. And as I'm going, I'm laying it flat, smooth, and I'm going to give it a little reverse zigzag there. And I'm just going and letting the machine again do the work. Needle down when you stop. Yep, good, good, good. I'm happy with that. And same thing here. Let the machine do the work, needle down. Now when I get down to here, I kind of know where I need to be. This is where my mask is going to start sewing in, so I'm going to put a pin there so that I don't make that mistake. I know where I need to start sewing the mask. And what's great about this is that you can just put that mask, you should be able to just tuck it right into that hem. You don't have to sew those darts down or anything. I'm going to let that, doesn't have to be exact either. There's going to be a little bit of forgiveness in the bias tape. When I get to here, I'm going to give a little backwards just to secure it. And I'm going to make sure that I have that nice and tucked in there, and I don't need these anymore. They're just kind of annoying and in my way because I have it folded and inside my bias tape. And same thing here. So I've eliminated having to sew that down a little forwards and backwards to knot it right there for the mask. And I'm going to just go with gas. You see how I'm using my fingers to keep my fabric flat and in place? And as I'm getting to the end of my mask, I'm going to make a little V there, a diagonal, and I'm just going to kind of tuck that in, maybe overlap it a little bit with each other, and fold it just like, I'm going to get my finger out of the way, just like that. And this is a great tool. If you find one of these, it's actually used for turning fabric inside out, but it also works for things like that where you need to get really close into the machine. And if I wanted to, I could even go like that, but I think we're good. We're good. And so, all right, so I have a nice clean stitch on my mask there. I'm going to do the other side. And I'm going to mark where the mask needs to be sewn in here, and I'm also going to mark it. I'm going to mark it on this side too. Keep in mind that you want the bigger part of the bias tape underneath of you. You do not want that. You do not want to be sewing it this way. You want to be sewing it this way with the more narrow piece facing you. So I'm going to give that a little overlap. I'm going to just kind of do a little tuck and fold like that, tuck and fold, and turn it over like that. And I'm going to use my little handy tool. You can use a seam ripper, you can use scissors, and I'm going to just gently put that into place. Put my needle down to get me started. This is where sometimes you might need a little help. Okay, I'm holding on to those threads to give me a little start, a little backwards to knot it. All right, I'm good to go. So now I'm going to sew this. And keep in mind, I'm watching where the needle's going, but I'm more watching where the fabric's going and making sure that we stay right there so we get a nice clean finish on our bias tape. And we don't go too far left or right. All right, everything's looking lovely. I think my mom's gonna love this. I'm really excited to make it for her. And there's my pin. And so I'm going to get ready to tuck that in. And so, as I'm doing it, be careful with your fingers, ladies. I have known women that have put a finger or two through a machine. And again, I don't think that we need these darts anymore because we're coming in and we're just pushing that into the bias tape. Oh, I lost my fold. And I have my marking down here for the bottom so I kind of know where my top is to put it back in place. This is my bottom. Right? I'm just going to put a little pin in there. And I lost my fold, so I'm going to bring that fold forward. Remember, dot, pin to center. All right. All right. Yeah. Oh, wait a minute. The folds are going this way. Oh, I just caught my own mistake. All right. Very good. I love when I do that. All right. Perfect. Let's get it sewn. Let's get her done. And I am going to let go of that because it's sewn in at this point. And I'm just going to make sure to try and put that fabric as close as I can to that corner. And I hope that the video is showing this very well for you. And I've got to fold. And I'm going to knot it back and forth. Push your knot. The nice thing about making these with the same fabric and making your own bias tape is that now this is 100% washable. It's not ribbon, it's not any kind of synthetic or anything that may be problematic to wash. It's going to be really simple and easy to care for, and people can just throw it in the wash with their laundry, and you know, if it is contaminated with anything, the wash will work it out. They say this virus dies when you wash things in a hot temperature, so that is good to know. Alright, and as you can see, take our pins out. There's our mask. And I made this one for my mom. And I'm going to put it on for you and take a picture so you can see. But it's completely reversible. So that if she's feeling blue, she can wear blue. And if she's feeling pink, she can wear pink. Make sure to clear your threads. This is that beginning. I had a little bit of trouble with the machine grabbing it. So I'm going to start from this side. And like I'm already in the beginning of it, and then come to the end and reverse it just to overcome that machine not wanting to start because the feed dogs didn't have anything to grab onto. There's these little feet inside these little wheels that are called feed dog, and they have to grab something. And sometimes when you're sewing something narrow, they can't grab the fabric to pull it through. So sometimes you have to go in a reverse direction. But I'm really pleased with how it turned out. I'm excited. I'm going to put it on and take a picture and show it to you. All right, guys. If you have any questions, leave them in the post. Thanks. Bye.